So this last week was pretty rough as Americans, and I'm sure if you've seen the news, you know what I'm talking about. Just seeing the way that people treated each other, the violence. And I was talking with a guy last week. We were having a conversation about it, and he was really just having a tough week, really struggling. The way he described it was, I don't want to go to work. It just feels like blah, blah, blah. It was, the weather wasn't great. It was typical January in Southern Oregon. We had all these political issues going on, the election in Georgia, and he was really just not in a great state of mind. And so I said to myself, because I was that guy having the conversation with myself, I said, so how are we going to change this? Because the circumstances clear across the country we don't get to affect, but the one-on-one conversations with those around us we do get to affect. Thankfully, I have a great wife who was able to breathe some normalcy to my perspective. But it brought about the mindset of our time here on earth really is short. And my struggle, which I'm sure others will agree, is that if we get so myopic, so zoomed in on today, that we lose or we delude the perspective of eternity, it really affects us at a personal level and our effectiveness with others. And even parenting from that mindset doesn't work well. Husbanding from that perspective doesn't go well. Running a business with that perspective doesn't go well. But you end up so zoned in on the circumstances of the day that it really hurts you. It causes harm. So David had this perspective. It's from Psalm 39:4. Show me, O Lord, my life's end and the number of my days. Let me know how fleeting is my life. And that last part really spoke to me. Let me know how fleeting is my life. And my perspective was to think of my life as a speck in all of eternity. And yet I'm living in a little tiny part of that speck of time. But if I can zoom back and I can see that there's this eternal, really being God, my creator, who wants to spend time with me, that's a different perspective, because then I can see how fleeting my life is, how short it is, but how specific God is in caring about that. And so that gets you to the point usually where you think, you know what? I need to have that perspective back with God. I don't need to be so zoned into what's going on, the negativity and the hurt and the bad, where it prevents me from really being influential and effective in my relationships. It also reminded me that we don't have an infinite number of days. So how we spend our time really does matter. How we invest our time matters. The people that we communicate with, it matters. You know, as a kid, time seemed to go so slowly. Think of waiting for a holiday. You know, we just came through the Christmas season. I remember when I was a kid, you'd be waiting for Christmas, and it would seem like it took forever. And now it seems like we just put our Christmas decorations from last year, and then we're ready to take them out again. And it's just this much quicker cycle as I've reached my middle-aged years, which my kids are quick to inform me of as you get older. So those moments, they seem to just race by, and they're never to return. Time literally passes you by, and you can't get back to the moments of yesterday, yesteryear, anywhere. And as we age, it just seems to go faster and faster. The key is, how are we spending our hours and our days and our years? We ultimately are exchanging them for something. If we're at work, we're exchanging our time and our expertise for money. If we're working in ministry, we're exchanging our time and hopefully effectiveness to try and help others or bring them closer to the Lord or show them, hey, this is how you maybe live differently. If you're raising kids, you're spending your time raising kids. You're trying to make great humans or adults. That really forces us to to swim upstream, so to speak. It's how we spend our time, because if we just pass it through, if we're passive about life, then the current of the world is ultimately going to just take us to a place that we wouldn't otherwise have chosen to go. Ephesians 5:15-17, it says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is." So understanding what the Lord's will is, it's hard, but it's sometimes easier if you can think about it from this perspective. Ultimately, he wants us to live with him and glorify him. Now, figuring out how to do that, that's a lot tougher. There's a lot of meat on that bone. What I've found, and this came from years ago, I remember when I played football, we did what were called everyday drills, or EDDs. And they were drills that we did every practice the same way every time. It was things like getting in your stance, taking your first step at the line of scrimmage, where you're going to put the ball after the play. Those were everyday drills, and our coaches, they just pounded it into us. It made sense years later, which now we're years later because I'm older. And I was having a conversation with a guy that had been a coach for years, and he was a very successful coach. He'd coached a lot of state championships, a lot of success. A lot of players had moved through his program onto the next level. And I asked him how he really was so successful. His perspective was awesome. He said, "Jake, being a good coach is just about communicating the fundamentals." He said, the fundamentals are the same no matter at what point in the game you're at. If you're swinging a baseball bat, there's a fundamental way to do it, to make your body move with your hip movement and your arm movement, shoulders and your eyes working together. Those are fundamentals. They're the basics. Well, it's much the same transition from the sports world, which is the better you are at the fundamentals, the more successful you are in programs. I talked to a guy who was a super successful competitive shooter, and I said, "Wow, how are you so good?" He said, "I do the fundamentals, I just do them faster than most people." I said, that should be enlightening, but it's really basic. And he said, "That's exactly it." He said, "I'm doing the same thing every time." So if we break that back to what we want to be doing every day, it's the fundamentals that are going to make the difference in our perspective. It's the fundamentals that are going to make the difference in how we spend our time. And it's the fundamentals that make the difference in the people that we are able to influence. So again, in Ephesians, where he says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise." There's not a shortcut to becoming wise. We can only do it day by day, practicing those fundamentals and chipping away, so that at some point, we can hope we will become wise. I sure know I'm not there at this point. I think my expectations were a lot higher for myself, wisdom-wise, for my age. But chip by chip by chip, day by day by day, if I keep spending the time, keep on the fundamentals, I'm confident that the Lord will continue to refine me and change me. Without him, I will be carried along on a current to some place that I otherwise would not have chosen to be. That's my word for you guys. Thank you.